Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to show off a few things that are getting going here in the early spring. We put up a video 3 or 4 days ago showing about 10 things that had jumped out into bloom, and there's a bunch more. It seems like every day things are really starting to wake up. So we're going to jump right in. This clematis right here is called Henryi. Has very large white flowers on it. It starts off kind of with a greenish hue to it, and then more and more gets more and more vivid white. You can see how large the flowers are on it. We showed off Dr. Rupel in the video the other day. This one's just getting started. This one's in the type 2 group, and these tend to bloom on older wood. Type 2 clematis will bloom not only in spring, but they'll come back around and bloom again as it's cooling off in the fall, which makes it nice, but there's less opportunity to really prune them. So the best idea on these is to put them in a space where you can really let them get quite big. And then every 3rd or 4th year, you can, after spring blooms, you can cut it pretty hard. It'll slow down the flowering for some period of time until it recovers from that. But these, I mean, I'm just always amazed by how large the flowers are on Henryi. And again, it's just getting started. It'll be pretty covered in these really large white flowers over the next week or two. And again, the vine will look good through the season. They're deer resistant, and then we'll see some more flowers on these in the late summer and into fall. A few quick cultural things on clematis. These are actually alkaline tolerant, meaning they'll take higher pH soils. Not a lot of plants for that. Our pH is acidic, but it's not very acidic, and so they're perfectly happy here in our soil. But if you have alkaline soils, clematis are something that will work for you. They like full sun on the top of the plant, but they actually like their roots shaded. So planting them up against a fence, up against a trellis, up against something, or underplanting them like we have with the pansies and other annuals that we plant around here. So the sun comes up on this. It's in the sun for, gosh, close to 12 hours during the summertime. But again, the roots down at the bottom are shaded. Clematis are actually one of the few things you can actually plant pretty deep as well, and that will help with some of that shading. They're hardy in like zone 4 to 11, so almost everybody watching, can find a spot for a clematis. This Hellebore is called Sparkling Diamond. It's in the Winter Jewels series. Really amazing Hellebore. We have lots of Hellebores blooming out here in the garden right now, and I mean a whole lot. They've been blooming for 8 weeks or so at this point. This one starts out just vivid white, double flower. It's almost lotus-like, this flower, but it still has the all the pollinator parts inside of it exposed, so any pollinators that want to come along and take advantage of this can. The flowers go from this kind of really bright white bud, bright white flower, and then fade to almost a greenish hue to them like this. And I'll go and pop this one off and just show you how amazing that looks. And it stays on the plant for weeks and weeks and weeks. It looks like it's continuing to flower as this flower just kind of dries out over time and becomes greener. We put up a video earlier in the season pruning back Hellebore. So this had a lot of old foliage from last year. It carried through the winter, and we cut it back. Then it popped up, put on this big show. We actually have 2 of them here in the garden. And now new foliage is starting to emerge that'll carry during the summertime now, which will look fresh and good. And sometime about next January, we'll cut that back again, and it'll do this again. It'll be bigger, better, fuller each time, but really love this variety. There are a few lilacs that will do okay here in our southern climate. We're in Raleigh, North Carolina, zone 7B. I'll occasionally see one here and there that are doing okay. The best performer for me, and one that I've literally grown tens of thousands of, not an exaggeration, is this Korean lilac called Miss Kim. It doesn't require as much cold during the winter time to get it to set flower buds and flower. Also here in the southeast, we have a lot of humidity, and so the French lilacs tend to get powdery mildew problems pretty badly. This one is a lot more resistant to that. You can see it grows as a small round mounding shrub. It's not as long a bloomed as other lilacs, but when it's in bloom and they're open, they have an amazing scent, just like any other lilac. You probably could argue of which ones smell better or not, but this one you would definitely say this is a lilac. The buds start off kind of a purplish pink hue, and that's the way they look like they're going to open up. But the inside of each individual flower is actually white, and so it has almost a two-tone pink and white appearance in the flowers. Again, it has a mounding habit. It'll reach 6 to 8 feet in height, 6 to 8 feet in width. Not super tolerant of pruning from the top down. And so any pruning you do on this thing from the top down will limit flowers the next year. You can do a little bit of tip pruning, where the flowers are, finishing on it, but keep in mind, you probably just want to let it grow, and then 1 year just take it way back all at once if you need to, and take half the plant down, and then you can go a few years again without doing that, and you'll build your flowers back up over time. We've limbed this one up into a tree form, so I haven't done any top pruning on it, but I have done some bottom pruning on it so we could underplant it with some other things. This is another alkaline tolerant plant. So was the Hellebore, which is kind of strange. Most of the things that I show off on this channel really love acidic soils, but the first three things in this video will all tolerate alkaline soils. But this is Miss Kim lilac, Korean lilac. Again, you can see how showy this thing is. Once it's finished flowering, it just kind of eases back into the background of everything else, and we have other flowering things that are around it. It's just a good looking green shrub. In cooler areas, these are hardy in zone 4 to 8, and in cooler areas, you'll get some good winter color on it. The foliage is a little tough on this for me by the end of the season, and so I really don't see that good fall foliage that others would in cooler climates. One other tip on these is in southern areas, you might want to put it in a little bit of afternoon shade. So it needs good air movement so it doesn't end up with any powdery mildew issues. But this one right here it's in a good amount of sun early in the day, and then late in the day, it's in a bit of shade. It also has its root shaded as well. Root shade can go a long way to relieving stress on plants that are under heat stress. This is a weigela called Shining Sensation, and I truly think this is the best dark foliage weigela, period. I've grew several of them when I had my nursery, sold lots of them, just observing all of these varieties. This one is the most compact growing, most floriferous. I mean, it's just completely covered in flowers when it's flowering. So it has this wonderful dark foliage that holds all season long. Then here in early to mid-spring, it comes to life with all these bright pink flowers, which are, if you have hummingbirds early enough, if you have butterflies early enough, they love these things. Then it'll stop flowering, and then retains that foliage and this great kind of beautiful arching habit. And then it will get remontant flowers. It'll actually, this one right here, probably almost always had a flower on it last summer somewhere. If you looked around it, you were going to find a few flowers here and there. The foliage will fade a bit as the summer goes on. These are hardy in zone 5 to 8, and I will tell you in zone 7 and 8, these would prefer a little bit of afternoon shade. So it's getting lots and lots of direct sun. And then we have a large oak on the back of the property back here that puts it in the shade, probably around 3 o'clock or something like that, and into the evening. It's in a shady space. But just a fantastic plant. These will get pruned after they flower if they need any pruning. This one, I'll probably rein it back in just a bit after it finishes this initial flowering. Just kind of reset it just a bit, because it's it's going to grow a foot or so after it finishes flowering. So knowing that about it, I'll reduce the size on it just a bit. But otherwise, if you can find the Shining Sensation weigela, it really is, I think, the best dark foliage variety. The Shining Sensation weigela, the species on that one is Weigela Florida. The one that's right beside it right here, this gold foliage one, is Weigela lumanzii, and this variety is called Aurea, which has this gold foliage. It starts off really bright gold in the spring, and then it will kind of fade into kind of a lime green color during the growing season. Pretty much gets about the exact same size and shape of Shining Sensation. So somewhere in that, you hold it in that 3 to 4 foot range. It's going to try to get bigger if you let it. This one took a little bit of, it had leafed out really early and got a little bit of freeze damage on it, knocked off some of the earliest foliage and damaged a few of the flowers. But this one has pink and white flower on it. Again, these are going to be great for hummingbirds and butterflies if they're around. This one will also get residual flowers on it, so pretty much throughout the summer we'll see some additional flowers on it. Again, it can be pruned after it flowers. Has this amazing gold color, and it looks great next to the dark foliage. variety right next to it. These are going to be great in cottage gardens, and you know, they're the type of plant that comes out, puts on this big, beautiful flower show, and then becomes the kind of the background piece to your other, you know, longer, you know, perennials that went dormant during the winter that come out and bloom during the summertime. But really, really great plant. We've moved this thing around the garden a couple times already, and it's responded perfectly fine to that. Again, you know, it's one of those plant it and forget it kind of plants. You saw that I added a coat. It is a really cold April day. I think it's in the 40s out here. Wind is blowing. It's rained most of the day, so this is a little gap in the rain where we're filming. So I threw on a coat. I came out very, very optimistic that it was still spring with my shorts and my short sleeve shirt on. This Encore Azalea is a variety called Debutante, and it's a standard. It's been limbed up into a tree form. I think we have like 7, 8 different Encore Azaleas out here. This is Autumn Debutante, and again, it's just been limbed up into a tree. It will bloom now in the spring. I think we showed it off back in October in full flower. It's nowhere near full flower. It's absolutely budded up. It'll be flower to flower here in a week or so. These are, you know, always going to get asked about finding one of these. They grow a lot of them down on the Gulf Coast, and I know they probably end up at, you know, Home Depot is probably your best bet for finding one of these standard Encores. They do grow a lot of them, but I think they disappear pretty quickly off the shelf when they arrive in stores, because, I mean, it is absolutely fantastic to have one on a stick like this. Regular Autumn Debutante will get 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet. They're hardy in zone 6B to 10, so it's into 6 a little bit. So if you're looking for the regular, you know, Debutante, it does have one of the better pink Encores in my opinion. It's just a really, really, really nice pink. And again, you know, I like this one limbed up as a tree form. This is a hydrangea paniculata called Heuchera. This one, when we think of hydrangea paniculatas, they're really the easiest hydrangeas to grow because it doesn't matter how cold the winter gets. It blooms on new wood. And so hydrangeas like Limelight and White Wedding over here, and of course PG way in the past, all been very, very popular because they're so easy. They typically, you just put them out in the full sun and they grow and bloom during the summertime. This one isn't being grown for flowers. This one's being grown for foliage. It will flower, but it's really mainly being grown for this incredible variegation that it has. These are hardy in zones 3 to 9, and here in zone 7B, 8A in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've got it in a little bit of shade because this variegation will burn some in the direct sun. It gets direct sun for about 4 or 5 hours a day, but it's in the shade the rest of the day. This one can get 8 or 9 feet, 10 feet in height, just like any other paniculata, which we used to call tree hydrangeas back when it was just PG and a few other varieties that were being grown. So it will get some size on it over time, but I wanted to show this one off, not for flowers, but for what it can do in the garden, just showing off with its foliage here in the spring. Next up is a Heuchera that's jumped out blooming pretty early in April. This variety is called Tapestry. It's very, very showy. It has kind of a green edge and then a darker, almost purple center on it. Some of the new growth coming out on it in the spring almost has a kind of a bluish hue to it, which is super interesting. Again, flowers just getting going on these right now. This is one of those plants. I mean, this is Heuchera, which is a combination of Heuchera and tiarella, which are two of our great native perennials. These will actually take alkaline soils as well. This is probably a plant that looks best in a large group. Most of our garden here is one-offs and you know lots of one-of-a-kinds. This plant probably would look best in a group of 3 or 5. I find that for us here, where we're getting a lot of rainfall in the south, that they do best on a little bit of slope in a well-drained space. This is kind of dry shade up under a red bud beside me, and it's doing fine here. But for the most part, when I see these doing extremely well in the landscape here in the south, they're on a bit of a slope, a bit of a, you know, they have really, really good drainage, and that seems to really help with them. But this one's been happy here. It'll come out of the gate really, really vigorously, and the leaves will end up about this large on it. Just a great ornamental plant. Again, you know, if I was growing this one in in a garden that wasn't drifts of one, which is my description of this garden, I would probably have it in a large group of this would look really, really great. Next up is the Stellar Ruby Magnolia, which you can just look at. I don't really have to say much about this one. Look how nice this plant actually looks. This is an evergreen. It's hardy in zone 7 to 9. Beautiful, beautiful foliage on this variety. It gets these ruby colored flowers, which are just starting to open now. Each of these stems probably has 8 to 10 flowers. So whatever how many stems that is, times 8 or 10 is how many flowers are going to be on this thing over the next few weeks. And then it gets ongoing flowers during the summertime, not as heavily as it is here during the spring months. You can see how upright and fastigiate it is, how full it grows. Sometimes I see these in containers at garden centers, nurseries. Doesn't seem to like the containers as much, and so they don't look quite as good, but every time I see one in the ground, this is how full and how full they look, how clean the foliage is. This is a banana shrub hybrid, and it has this incredible fastigiate habit. Pat McCracken is the breeder on this, same person that did the Sunshine Ligustrum. We've had him on the channel before. Touch of Gold Holly is also his, but this one is an incredible introduction. This can reach 15 feet in height, maybe 6 feet in width, something like that, hardy in zone 7 to 9. And it's just one of our favorite plants in the landscape at this point. It's just become a perfect centerpiece for this bed. So lastly for this video, this is Autumn Lilac Encore Azalea. Autumn Lilac's probably my favorite Encore Azalea. I think there's 34, including the new variegated one, Autumn Moonstruck, that's coming out or is out, probably with limited availability on it. But this one is absolutely my favorite. It's just blooms like this. Every time it comes into bloom, it's like this, and they haven't even fully opened. It'll be solid lavender purple here over the next week or so. It comes back around in the fall and does the exact same thing that it's doing now. This one's hardy in zone 6 to 10, so lots of you can grow this one. The one I talked about earlier, Debutante, is 6B to 10. I've got Autumn Fire and Bonfire were in the last video. They're also hardy in zone 6. And so if you're in zone 6, just be on the lookout. Make sure it's one that is hardy in your area. Lilac would be included in that. This one only gets about 3 feet in height, about 3.5 feet in width. Really, really easy, perfect little low mound. Got it on this little curve in the path here, and it's just a big time show off. When it's not blooming, it's a neat little round green ball. When it is blooming, look at there. It's definitely one that's look at me, look at me. Again, one of the heavier blooming of the Encore Azaleas. This is Autumn Lilac. So thank you guys for watching. We have, again, like every probably 5 or 6 days, this time of year, there's a whole new group of things that are waking up and coming into bloom. The peonies right next to it will be in full bloom here in the next week or so. And, as I look around, lots and lots of other things as well. So thanks for following along with the channel. And there's a few other things blooming this week. What's blooming in your garden?